All right, ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention for a few moments, please. My name is Kevin Edgecombe. I'm the current chair of UDI Okanagan, and I am privileged to be here today amongst all this great group of people, and particularly our legends of UDI and legends of Kelowna, truly. I think we're all in for a real treat today, and I just want to thank you all for taking the time to come out and start eating at 11:30 a.m. It's a little bit rare, especially when you add wine. Now, just a reminder, there is wine available in the hallway. It's not free, but you know what? You might need it for some of the stories you are about to hear. Just a couple quick notes. The UDI Okanagan is pleased to reinvigorate its sign program. Those developments in the city of Kelowna that are coming to the table soon, we encourage you to contact Jennifer at the office to get a free Our Neighborhood sign in Kelowna. The first 10 people to do so will get a free sign that I think is an important message around Kelowna to make sure that people are recognizing the good work of all the development industry in the Okanagan. So please check that out. I can't stand up here on my soapbox without talking about the speculation tax and the need for us to continue our fight against the speculation tax. Please go to the website www.scrapthespeculationtax.com. Put your name forward for those of you who want to join the coalition. It's critically important to our community, and we really hope to see you do that. Now, to today's event. This has been something that we've been looking forward to for a very long time in the UDI board, and we're very excited about this. And we're very much appreciative of the sponsors who've helped make today happen. And I'm going to start by thanking our title sponsor, which is MNP. MNP is one of the largest national accounting, tax, and business consulting firms in Canada and is a known leader in the real estate and construction industry. Your local MNP real estate and construction advisors here today know your industry and is dynamic and understand the impacts of change to your success. MNP is proud to support UDI with today's luncheon, as well as their ongoing annual title sponsorship of the UDI Under 40 Mentorship Series. Attending from MNP and seated at the speaker and sponsor tables are Brian Levesque, Brian Postumus, Karen Christensen, and Gary Parmar. Thank you very much to MNP. Our first supporting sponsor is Aplin Martin. Aplin Martin is celebrating their 50th year in business and 8th in Kelowna. They are an innovative firm of civil engineers delivering sustainability and cost-conscious engineering to clients in both public and private sectors. Their team of experienced project managers and design professionals has provided accessible, responsive services via their locations in Kelowna, Vancouver, Surrey, Calgary, Edmonton, and Toronto. Their clients range from independent landowners to well-established residential, commercial, and industrial developers, from rural municipalities to regional, provincial, and federal government agencies. They specialize in hillside development and complex subdivision design to suit the challenging natural topography while retaining the most optimal view potential and livability for your community. They also provide civil engineering services to the municipal sector to provide sustainable, realistic, and workable solutions to build communities able to sustain growth and development for years to come. Strong relationships, volunteering in their community, and their industry are at the core of their added value they offer. To find out how they can leverage those on your project, contact them today. Attending from Aplin Martin and seated at the speakers' tables are Ben Rawlinson, Melissa Moncoeur. Also attending are Josh Graff, Hayden Hansen, Ryan Boven, Dylan Dooley, Jordan Beach, Tracy Gansky, and Gray Gibbs. Thank you very much to Aplin Martin. And our second supporting sponsor is Real Estate Law Group. Real Estate Law Group is a boutique law firm specializing in all areas of real estate law, including residential, conveyancing, commercial transactions, real estate development, strata property law, municipal rezoning, development applications, real estate financing, and investment. Real Estate Law Group acts for developers, homeowners, strata corporations, and lenders. Real Estate Law Group is pleased to offer its clients fixed fees for residential conveyances transactions. Attending from Real Estate Law Group and seated at the speaker's table are Katie Williamson and Odessa Loro. Thank you very much to Real Estate Law Group. I'd like to also note that Your Worship, Mayor Colin Bazran is with us today, as well as Councillor Tracy Gray. Thank you very much for being here. That's better. He just announced recently we should clap more. New members. BC Housing is joined. Carrington Homes. Attending from Karen today is Sheldon Walensky. And new member Terra Housing. Attending from Terra is Lindsay Fraser. Thank you very much, new members. I'm going to leave you to your meals. Lunch will be started to be served fairly quickly because we want to leave as much time as possible for this epic event that we're all so excited about. So please enjoy your lunch. We'll talk to you in about 15 minutes.
when you sit down.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble! Just kidding. I thought that'd get your attention. It's kind of like a Nashville hockey game startup, isn't it? It was a little embarrassing, frankly. Let's have a sword fight. No, this isn't about fighting. This is about hearing some great stories from some amazing individuals that our community has known for a long, long time. And as I sit here today as the chair of UDI, I'm very proud to be introducing these gentlemen before us. Before I do that, I just want to quickly ask members of the UDI Local Okanagan Chapter to please stand, the Board of Directors. Anybody else here from the Board of Directors, UDI? There they are. Congratulations. Thank you all. Appreciate that. And none of this could happen without the excellent work of Jen and Shelley, who put this all together. So thank you very much. Wonderful organization as usual. So it was probably 9 or 10 months ago when we conceptualized this idea, and we've been very excited about it ever since. We want to get going. Just prior to introducing our panelists and our moderator today, I just want to tell one quick story. It was about 10 years ago, myself and two buddies had made the harebrained decision to buy a 31-foot boat in Cranbrook, of all places, and it was a hole in the water. My wife has never forgiven me for that purchase, but we were on our way back from Cranbrook with this boat in tow, and we missed a turn and ended up taking a 31-foot boat that weighed 15,000 pounds over the pass into Rosland. We missed the corner. Bad idea. So apparently I wasn't very good at navigation. What relevance does this have to this story? We were in the town of Rosland, driving through Main Street, getting a lot of attention, when my cell phone rang. And who was it? None other than Lambert Schmaltz. And I was quite embarrassed about the idea that I was in Rosslyn driving down Main Street with a very large boat. But why on earth is Lambert Smaltz calling me? And I was shocked to find out that he was on a job site helping one of his family members frame a wall. And he called me for some pointers on framing the wall. And I'm telling you, that was my coming, what do you call it? When I validated myself that day, thanks to Lambert. I felt honored that this legend could actually call me for advice on a certain task on building something. Now, I think he just became forgetful over the years. I think he probably knows it. Maybe he just wanted to talk. I don't know. You'll hear soon that Lambert loves to talk. But the moral to this story, apart from the fact that I'm not good with geography, is that I believe in life everybody needs a mentor and everyone needs to be mentored. And I've never formally told Lambert this, but I will tell you that he has been my mentor for many, many years, and I'm very privileged to be here with him. Thank you very much for that. Sorry. Whew. So, heckling will be permitted as long as you've drank alcohol, okay? So that's the only rule. I'm going to start by introducing our panelists, and as I do, if they can take a chair up front, that would be fantastic. We're going to get this thing going. First off, I'd like to introduce R.J. Bennett. R.J. and his brother started their own company in 1952, acquiring various enterprises over the years. R.J. branched out on his own in 1989, starting Victor Projects Limited, which was named after his best racehorse, Traveling Victor. R.J. and his family have developed many commercial and residential projects. Commercial projects include Barron Centre, Gooshagan Village, Orchard Place, McCurdy Corner, and several other freestanding buildings in Kelowna, Vernon, Penticton, and Abbotsford. Current residential projects include Vineyard Estates on Boucherie Mountain in West Kelowna and Cameron Mews in Gooshagan Village. Completed residential projects include Balmoral, the Greens Balmoral, the Point at Glattley Bay, Gateway, and Gooshagan Village. RJ's other major interest is thoroughbred horse breeding and racing. He and his wife Lois own Flying Horse Farms, located in Glattley Bay, West Kelowna. They've been inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame in both Canada and British Columbia, and have also been named leading horse breeders in BC for 30 of the last 40 years. Please join me in welcoming R.J. Bennett. All right, the next legend today, Eric Jabs. In 1954, Eric started his first job in construction with Sam Bone, a Kelowna house builder. He worked there for the next 5 years. In 1958, he built his first house in his spare time. After selling the house to Dr. Don Lim, he left his job with Sam Bone and started his own construction business. In the last 60 years, Eric has been building single-family and multi-family houses, as well as commercial buildings throughout the Okanagan, Kamloops, the East Kootenays, and Edmonton, Alberta. Eric has been a resident of Kelowna for the last 65 years. Please welcome Eric Jabs. Lambert Smaltz. Lambert received his education in carpentry in Germany and immigrated to Kelowna in 1956. He has worked in the building construction and development industry ever since. Lambert has been past chair of the local chapter of the Canadian Home Builders Association and was on the provincial and national boards of CHBA. He was the national chairman of the CHBA Research Committee for Conversion to Metric. Oh, he's the guy. And was the past chairman of the Carpentry Advisory Committee of Okanagan College Trade Center. Lambert, along with his then partner, Paul Lineman, started Lambert & Paul Construction in 1964, the year I was born, and has been going strong ever since. Paul left the business in 1974. Thank you very much, and welcome, Lambert Smaltz. metric. Jeez. Walter Gray. Do you want to? Okay. Walter Gray, our moderator today. For 50 years, Walter has enjoyed and prospered in a career in radio. His business partner was Bob Hall. Walter built and managed 3 of the 7 commercial radio stations that currently exist in Kelowna. Along the way, Walter joined his partner Bob in establishing Sun Country Cablevision in Salmon Arm, Enderby, and Armstrong. In community life, Walter served 2 terms as Kelowna Chamber of Commerce president, was a founding member of the Kelowna Kasagai Sister City Association, and was instrumental in the construction of Kasagai Japanese Garden behind City Hall. He served as president of the BC Association of Broadcasters, Radio and Television, and was a director of the Canadian Association of Broadcasters. Walter also served on various corporate boards and Crown corporations. Walter is best known as Kelowna's longest-serving mayor for 12 years, first elected mayor in 1996, 9 years on, 6 years off, and back for a final 3-year stint. He stepped down and retired in 2014. Now fully retired and spending winters in Surprise, Arizona, we welcome Walter Gray. Thank you very much, Walter. Let's get started.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin, and it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Welcome to our panelists, I can barely wait, and UDI members and guests. It's really an honor for me to be here and out of retirement for the next hour and a half. Today's Kelowna Development Industry Retrospective is a legendary look at Kelowna and the Central Okanagan development. It's an opportunity to move forward by drawing from the past experiences and stories from our 3 living legends in Kelowna development, RJ, Eric, and Lambert. We have in UDI a lot of seasoned developers and home builders and sub-trades, and a lot of newer, more modern thinkers in the industry as well. The success of your industry will always be a sharing of ideas. While no one here today wants to live in the past, it's always fun and beneficial to reflect into the past. The past is the foundation for the future. RJ, Eric, and Lambert, who were very much part of those earlier years in building this city, one development, one house, one commercial property at a time. Sometimes as a team, sometimes as competitors. None of these 3 were born in Kelowna, but all 3 have been here since boyhood. All 3 have had their adult sleeves rolled up here since the late 50s. Each has been in the development business for well over half a century. That's halfway back to Kelowna's year of incorporation, 1905. Population then, by the way, was less than 200 people. The original size of the city, 5.6 kilometers squared. That's 564 hectares. Compared to now, 212 kilometers squared, or 40 times the original size of this city. City budget this year is $518 million, approximately 25% of that from taxation. 1 more month before you have to pay your taxes. $518 million now compares with Kelowna's first year as a city, where the budget was 3 goats, a sheep, and a bushel of apples. By the way, West Kelowna's budget is $86.6 million, and 1/3 of its budget comes from taxation. I'll repeat for the benefit of our mayor, Kelowna's is only 1/4 of the total. To put Kelowna's growth into perspective, halfway back to the birth of the city as a city was about 1957-58. That's the year the original Okanagan Lake Bridge was opened, and CHBC television was brand new, grainy, and in black and white. Most people couldn't afford a television back then, so we watched it in front of the store windows at S&S Television on Bernard Avenue, or across the street on the corner where the HSBC is now. It was Loans Hardware. And we have a rhetorical question for RJ. Did Bennett's Hardware sell TVs or just Chesterfields and social credit memberships? Kelowna had a population of less than 10,000 back in the late 50s. Fast forward, city population of Kelowna is now 130,000. Kelowna is here today largely due to the award-winning development community that this city enjoys. Kelowna's healthy growth rate is opportunity for developers and builders and trades. For me, and all my years in and out of public office, I've always said, and many of you here have heard me say it more than once, UDI and Kelowna home builders are the engines that drive the Kelowna economy. Today, our three panelists will take us back to the days when your handshake was your bond. We'll take you back to the days where if you poured your foundation before you got your building permit, it was wrong, but it wasn't a cardinal sin. We'll take you back to the days when asbestos insulation was the new, exciting building material. At the UDI Legends Luncheon today, it's back to the days where every builder used shiplap. Today, there are people in this room who have never used shiplap. Do you know what shiplap is? Well, now it's time to engage our panelists. And later in the program, we're going to open up the floor to our audience. So if you have a question you wish to ask any of these three gentlemen, feel free to do so. Well, we're scheduled to wind up at 1:30, including some closing comments by UDI President Kevin. I'm asked to remind the gathering that the panelists have graciously agreed to remain behind after the adjournment if any of you wish to engage them privately. And Jennifer, if there's anything you need to do to keep the moderator and the panelists on track, go for it. And lots of luck. Okay, so we're ready now to go to the panel. Each, beginning with RJ and then Eric and then Lambert. They'll give you a bit of a history and behind the scenes, never published, all the lowdown on a number of significant capital projects and major initiatives in our community. Real game changers as we reflect back into the past. So we'll ask RJ to come up, and RJ, we wanted you to make some comments on, oh, you can stay right there, RJ, if you wish, and if it's more comfortable, well, do you want to come up here? No, he can come up here. When we get to questions from the audience, maybe they can stay there. So we want RJ to talk about Orchard Park, its early beginnings, how it happened, why it was there, why it was so far out of the city of Kelowna at the time, more than halfway to Rutland. And we'll also get him to talk about the industrial land across the highway, the Barley stretch, where the fire hall is now, the McDonald's, the Sandman, and even on the north side of Enterprise Way, Western Star. So just give us a bit of a reflection into the past in terms of those two big projects.
Well, seeing Walt Gray used up most of my time. Basically, what I was going to start with, and my daughter Mary Jean's here, and she said if I'm talking too much, she'll look over at me and do this, so I'll watch. Anyhow, I'm doing a bit of a history for the family, and I will start with my father. And he came here in 1930. But I'll go back to where he started in New Brunswick. And his father went overseas he was born in 68, 18, and he went overseas in 15, and he was 47 years old. But when he came back, he took a soldier settlement place up in the Peace River country, Alberta, which Teepee Creek, I think it's called. And he went up there and he worked with his father. He went up there when he was 18 years old, July, I think. And He worked for 3 years with his father up there. And they came from very humble back in New Brunswick. His father worked in the sawmills in the bush, and that was the employment. I remember him telling this story about their house burnt down when he was 6 years old. They hired a team. He said it wasn't a farm we lived on, it was an acreage. You couldn't make a living off it. But it took 2 days for a team of horses and to load the family and the furniture on to get the town they're going to live in. They rented a house there for $3 a month. Now, what do you call it, a well, an outhouse, and a wick lamp, and I guess that was about it, wouldn't it? But I'd go back, he went with his father up into the Peace River, and the 3 years he put in farming on that farm. Then my grandmother arrived out from New Brunswick and thought they'd put the family together. Now it's not an embarrassment to me, but my grandfather thought, I've had enough of that life, I've got a new one, thank you, and that sort of broke up the family. My father then went to Edmonton, and he went to work for Marshall Wells, which is a big wholesale, bigger than, like a Walmart. They sold everybody, and he got all his training there because he had worked in a store in New Brunswick. But the whole thing was, he was in there, and then he and my mother married in 27, and he went into a partnership in a hardware store in Westlock. And in Westlock, he and the partner, I think he put $2,000 in. They'd sold some property they had in Edmonton, and that was it. He sold out to his partner in 29 or 30, and then he came to Kelowna. And now he had $12,000. And Lecky Hardware was for sale in Kelowna, and he was one that came from Manitoba in 04. And he wanted to sell his place. He knew the Depression was here, and they dealt on that piece of real estate. No, he didn't buy the building, he just bought the hardware. And Lecky wanted 100 cents on the dollar for all his inventory, and they argued for a month or a half. Finally, I think Father said, I told him I'll take 100 cents on the dollar, but only the stock I want. Agreed. Send the rest down to one of his warehouses. He said within an hour, Lecky's there. He said, I only took white paint, full kegs of nails, and I only wanted stuff I could have, and I sent everything down to him. He said, what saved me, I bought that stock at 67 or 66 cents on the wholesale dollar. That carried me through the 30s. But I bring that up is that how we arrived. Now, I don't think I was necessarily born into privilege. I had good times, and neither of my two friends here were born into privilege either. And Walt Gray, his father was in retail too. So that was a way of making a living. But now I'll get into the actual Kelowna. I guess my love of horses got me into more trouble, but I had to buy land to support the horses. So that's part of it. And we all can look out there and say, I would like to own that. And I don't know if many of you know Pat Mcbride. Well, Pat Mcbride, we'd got the place where we have the superstore now, and I was having coffee one day with Pat, and he said, Bobby Knox came and wanted me to sell that, or buy that. I said, Pat, you would have sold it in 2 days for a profit. You're a flipper. And that's, on your property, how do you buy property like the things we own, like the El Dorado Ranch, my West Bank place? We've all owned longer than 50 years and actually been the longest owner of that property. So you got to hang in there, and all of you, as you say, you should buy a horse, and because my daughter's got a whole bunch for sale, and so that's how you get a property. Now I'll move along into the other one. We're in business on the main street in Kelowna, and the first piece of property I guess I bought was my father came to Bill and I. And just in the early 50s, and Chapin, his neighbor next door, had a restaurant and had died, and his family had, and they're trying to sell the building. So he said, I think we arranged, we paid $13,000 for that little building beside our store, and had to renovate it and rent it out. Then talking to the previous tenant, he said they'd offer it to me for $12. So my father wasn't interested in Bill and I, he was interested in looking after his old friend's family. That was it. But then the Empress Theater came along, and they had built they had traded the Empress Theater for the land where the Paramount is now, and they were trying to hold the town because it was heading for the golf course, and they were in the main street, and they were holding it there. And that was, Bill and I bought that piece of property and rented it to the banks for their temporary, and then sold it to Capital News, I think, got it. But these things went on. They're all small things as you're going along. But I'll get into the other one now. The city of Kelowna, and Jim Markle was the finance for the city of Kelowna, and he came to us in the town. I know Tom Capozzi signed for the Capozzis, and I think Bill signed for our family. We had to guarantee so much money because they were buying a light industrial site. And what brought that on was Dick Parkinson was mayor, and McGavin's Bakery had a small bakery downtown, and they are buying the place behind them, so they expand. And city council told them that we're going to be a bigger city. We can't have it all downtown. We got to have it light industrial. So they came and we signed the notes to the Bank of Montreal, and that took from Spalls on the main 97, all the way down to the creek, all the way out to the fire hall, and that was all light industrial. But what we found out when we were doing the Orchard Park, the city council had changed, and they're not bound by the last city council, and the new city council were selling zoning. And you can look along there and you have McDonald's. That's not light industrial, but it was for the good of the city. But always remember that if you're dealing with the city, I don't know how you cover it. I think if one was up in Vernon right now where they gave them the racetrack, and now the city's taken over and they're shaking their head. But what you don't use, you're going to lose, and that's basically it. But that's the whole area, and then you go into where the other center is the golf course, how that all happened too. And that's a long story, but these things move along, and you don't see it in hindsight. And I'm getting along now to Orchard Park. A chap in Kelowna, Lloyd Callahan, and Lloyd and I were good friends, and people knock him, but I got nothing but respect for him. But Lloyd and I had gone up to Rutland, and we were bidding on a piece of property in Rutland, which is now a strip mall out there. And Bill Jerome handled it, and somehow at the end of the auction, Bill Jerome still owned it. So we had talked about it, and then I said, I was talking to Bruce Smith, and I said, because he was up there bidding on it too, and had Okanagan Holdings. And I said, Bruce, are you interested in a partnership? He said, sure. So this went on. About a month later, Bruce came to me and he said, you know, I've got the building in Vernon with Okanagan Holdings with Super Valley Keller Douglas. And he said, I also, Sears, and they have come, and they want a regional shopping center, and they want us to put it together. Well, I'll say this for Lloyd. He was a worker. He went on. We had everything optioned. Stoberville, everything. All that land out there. And then we had to pick and choose all of it. And then we're just getting everything organized to do our own, and Marathon arrives in town. But they're dealing with the city. The city's going to sell them their light industrial across the road in competition. So anyhow, we ended up selling to them. And I remember the one thing they said, are we in the right location? So they hired 3 big firms from Vancouver to come up and do a study, and they ended up, Orchard Park was where they thought it should be. And they took it over from us at $35,000 an acre, but we paid more than that for some acres, and they're putting the whole thing together. And then there's the other piece they bought later on. I'll give you another. Lloyd came to me and he said, you know, Hudson Bay and Safeway are trying to buy something at Spall Road. He'd heard this. So I told Marathon, at this time they were building, and they went to Hudson Bay, and that's where Orchard Park extended all over to Springfield. And then they had to buy that piece of property from us at that time, and they both went there, and we put safe where the liquor store is now. I think they bought that property. But on that thing when it came together, there was a strip in there, and Bill, my brother Bill, you know, he didn't necessarily make a good partner, a great critic, but not a great partner. But he hung out, and they needed to get a piece of strip we had in there, and wouldn't sell it to them. And he held out, and I would have caved to the owner of my friends. I'm dealing with him, and I think they own it today. They own that strip in the middle of Orchard Park right now. So those are the things that came along, and I had here a great book on DeHart, and it tells you all about Kelowna. And he came here in 02 or 03, 200, 300 people here. They bought the ranch from Arthur Knox, the old rancher that owned, that's Knox Mountain, et cetera. And his property went from Mill Creek, North Glenmore, and Knox Mountain. There were 4,000 acres, and he wanted 75,000, and he wanted his money by the end of the month. Now, he had to have taken paper, because I don't think there was $75,000 here at that time. These group went ahead and they developed in lots, and I think the only thing they didn't get was Richter Street and that little bit where downtown and the boats used to come in. He had everything else. And in there, they went and sold farms, 10 and 20 acres, and lots. And they got him his money by the end of the month, but I said it'd be paper. And then in turn, he went on, and DeHart built his house, and he did a lot of things. He was mayor of Kelowna. When he was mayor of Kelowna, he was the one that purchased the park, and there was all sorts of things like that in the area. And it's a great book to read what happened to him. And anyhow, he married for the second time. He was widower, and he went over to England in 1913 to furnish this house. According to Jack Galbraith, he told me that when that boat arrived back, he was broke. The land crash of 1913 had happened. It all came back. So, he had a lot of things going for him, but just bad times, yeah. So that was, so I have a saying is, in life, don't mistake luck for genius. And the other one, when I listened to all these people phoning in on the radio and then writing letters to the editor, nothing's impossible if you don't have to do it yourself, physically or financially. There's the two things. Everybody's got an idea, but how? And I see my friend Barry Johnson here, and I was just thinking back. We had Aberdeen or Gushkin, and we had realtors as partners. And the only thing you find out when you got realtors as partners, you're just their bank. You provide the land and they sell it. Well, anyhow, some working for us at that time, but went out to see their stuff on Enterprise, or which road it was on. You're doing this. And anyhow, they were quite impressed, so I went and talked to them, and they came in. Of course, the realtors didn't want them in the company, but that's where they came and built, Sandstone, Sandhaven first, Sandstone, and all those ones, and then you did that thing for the Stewarts on the...
How about the land out of the AOR? The 90 acres out of the AOR?
Pardon?
Where Gushkin is?
Oh, no, the old Bill Stewart did that.
RJ, we got two more guys.
Well, you ate into my time.
Thanks, RJ. Maybe we should have had 3 separate meetings. Could we order dinners too? We may as well put it. Okay, our next speaker will be, which of you want to go first? Eric? Okay, Eric will come up. What I was to have done before I introduced RJ was to get them to tell their sort of personal story, and then when I talked about Orchard Park and the land on the other side of the highway, that was going to be one of the things I'd have them address as individuals. But come up and tell your story, and then I'll pop up and ask you to come back and talk about the specific thing we think you'd be an expert at.
Pardon?
This one here, or this? You just have to get quite close to that one.
Okay, I'll use this one here, maybe it'll work better. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here. I consider it a real honor to be able to speak to you, people who are the movers and shakers of Kelowna of today. You're doing a great job here putting up all these buildings, and high rises and everything. Well, one thing that I'm glad here, as you know, there's a lot of people that are opposed to all this development, especially high rises. Now, we've done a lot of building over the years here, but the people that are upset with it, I can tell them, don't blame me for ruining this city. I haven't built anything over 5 stories. But my beginnings go back to Eastern Europe, to Poland, where I was born in 1938. And after the Second World War, my younger brother and my mother left Poland for East Germany, and our dad joined us there because he was in a prison camp, military prison camp, and was released there. And so we spent 6 years in East Germany. And then in 1952, we fled, or the family decided to leave, and we fled the communist East Germany through West Berlin. That was before the wall went up, and to West Germany. And we spent the next year in about 4 different refugee camps. And then in the summer of 1953, we were able to immigrate to Canada, and we arrived here in Kelowna after a 10-day cruise, ocean cruise on a freighter, and 4 days on the railway. We arrived here, and also with the help of some relatives that had immigrated to Canada earlier. And so that for the next year, we lived in a picker's shack, which some of you younger people probably don't know what that is, but these are buildings that accommodate seasonal workers and that, and it was out in Glenmore. And on the property that was owned by the Occidental Fruit Company. They were one of the largest fruit companies. They had a packing house downtown. And we lived in there for a whole year. No indoor plumbing, wood stove. But before you feel too sorry for me, let me tell you that that was a huge improvement. And we were very, very grateful as a family that for the first time in I don't know how many years, we did not have to share our accommodation with anybody outside of our family. Interestingly, a few years later, I ended up buying the Glenmore land along with a couple of partners, Al Stober being one of them. And we didn't really develop it. We sold off parts of it. Actually, Barry Johnson, I understand, is here. I think his company bought some of the land and put some housing development in there. But we still own 20-some acres today. It's still in the land freeze, and I don't know if it'll ever come out. Probably not in my lifetime, but nevertheless, it's kind of a token thing for me that I ended up owning part of it, the land that we first lived on. Kelowna was a different city when I came here in '53. That was quite a few years later than RJ, and he's given you the background what Kelowna was like. And I remember the bridge, before the bridge, when it used to be a 8-hour drive to Vancouver from Vancouver to West Bank, and then another 8 hours wait to cross the ferry to Kelowna. And yet I remember at the time there some of the journalists in Vancouver were criticizing our premier for building the bridge because we didn't really need the bridge. He's only built the bridge so that he could get to his hardware stores faster than he had in Vernon and Penticton, so not much has changed with the journalists these days. But anyway, I think Kelowna didn't really start growing or taking off until the bridge was built, and then Kelowna started to get on the map. And then, of course, the next thing is when the Rogers Pass opened up, and all of a sudden the Albertans discovered Kelowna, and then, of course, the biggest thing was when the airport was built, because I don't think Kelowna would be what it is today without our modern airport that we have here. When I arrived here, I didn't speak any English, worked in the orchard there for the rest of the year, and then enrolled in school in grade 8, which I had also done in East Germany. And anyway, I was put in a special class to learn English, and I was, that's where I actually got to know Walter Gray first, because he was 14, I was 15, I was 1 year behind. They were going to put me in grade 9, and I said, no, I said, I've got to learn English first. You know? But anyway, I finished the year and passed my exam in grade 8. And so anyway, I keep telling people that I've done grade 8 twice, and they think I failed the first time. But I didn't. I did grade 8 the first time in German and the second time in English. But I certainly don't have a formal education by any stretch of the imagination. If I want to impress people there, I usually tell them that I've been educated in 3 different languages and in 3 different countries, you know, and they think that's just outstanding or whatever, you know, and I tell them, yeah, I went to school in Poland for 6 weeks, in East Germany for 6 years, and in Canada for 6 months. So anyway, the following year, I got a job with a house builder by the name of Sam Bone, who had been in Kelowna here from way back in the 30s. And interestingly enough, a couple of years later, when Lambert came over, we worked for the same builder there for how long, a year or so? 1 year? Yeah, so anyway, that's when I first got to know Lambert. So so Lambert didn't stay that long, a year, and then he went to work for another builder and eventually ended up forming his own company as well. I built my first house in '85 in my spare time, and when I sold it, and I don't know how many you know Dr. Don Lim. He was a well-known doctor. He's passed away now, but he got me started when he bought the house. Now I had a little bit of money, and so I quit my job and started on my own. And those were really interesting days. In many ways, I missed them. Things were pretty simple and straightforward. You'd go in for a building permit for a house. You would have one sheet that you filled out, which gave the square footage of the house and the value of the house and the legal description and address. And the value and the fee was based on that. And then one set of plans, you'd leave it at City Hall or go to City Hall. Well, actually, by the way, we only had 2 inspectors, one building inspector and a plumbing inspector, and they shared one secretary between the 2 of them. And if you took your application in the morning, and if you happened to be in, and you could go and meet somebody for coffee and go back an hour later and pick up your permit. The longest it would take, and that would be if he was out or not in, you would leave your application, but you certainly would have a building permit within 24 hours. Well, things changed as time went along, and now I'm basically out of construction way, but we still have buildings that we own and that manage, and it's basically a property management operation. Actually, the last couple of buildings that we put up, I hired what would have been my competition to build them for me, you know, because I can't put up with all this red tape and stuff that you guys have to face, and I really feel for you guys. But then I'm also told that Kelowna is still one of the best places to be building. Now you may know more about it, but it's not that long ago I was told that it takes 2 years to get a building permit for just a house. Now, I don't think it takes quite that long here in Kelowna. But anyhow, that's where I come from. I am grateful that we ended up in Kelowna. I think it's one of the greatest and most wonderful cities in spite of all the things that frustrate us here. I had a chance to travel the world and been to different countries and basically every continent other than Antarctica, and I have yet to find a place that I could honestly say I would sooner live there than in Kelowna, and that's why I'm still here after 65 years.
Eric, did you want to come back maybe after a breath? We'll get Lambert up here and you can come back and talk about the Okanagan Builders Land Development and your spec homes in Rutland at that time, but we'll have Lambert up now and we'll get that specific question addressed later. Oh, just Lambert, just before you come up, one thing I want to remind you of, Eric, when my partner Bob Hall and I moved our families to Salmon Arm, when we built a radio station in Salmon Arm and Revelstoke, and then we got a license 4 years later for Kelowna and came back to build CKIQ, my focus was on not only my wife, who had had 2 kids born the same calendar year, but pregnant with her third 2 years later. So I was busy, well, obviously I'd been busy earlier, but but I was too busy focused on building this radio station to worry about housing. So I phoned Eric and said, Eric, I said, I'm kind of desperate here. I need to rent a place. Have you got any places for rent? Oh, I could sell you. I said, no, I don't want to buy. I just want to rent. He said, come down, get the keys. I got a better deal for you. Went to his office. He gave me the keys. He said, here's the address. It's in Glenmore, your old neighborhood. It's on Richard Place. And I've just finished it. Nobody's lived in it. He said, I'll sell it to you. You had a real good mortgage rate at that time. He said, I'll make you a deal. You buy this house, and within 1 year, if you decide to build a house, which is what I wanted to do, he said, I'll take this house at market value, and then I'll build a new house. Well, then, of course, we had a fire, and I never got around to building my house, so the year thing expired. It was just a handshake agreement. And then, of course, I got to know Lambert, who built our first radio station. But that's another story. Lambert has his own stories now. So here's the story of the real Lambert Schmaltz.
I didn't like the portable radio because on the podium you get the attention. When you sit there, you might not. But anyhow, when I went to school in Germany, and whenever we had any function, we had to line up by size. So the biggest guy in the front, and I was either on the back or second back. The odd time I might be third from the back, but I was on the end. So I go home and I complain to my grandpa. My dad died early. And I said, I am always in the back. He says, Lambert, don't worry about it. After 21, they measure people only from here up. The rest doesn't count. As you notice today, because I'm the smallest, I'm the last on line. RJ took so much time, and not that there's something wrong with it. But you know, I'm running short again. I got a lot to say because I could fill 2 hours myself. But just the same, one thing I like to give a little dick to the UDI. I was one of the members from early days. I didn't appreciate go to too many meetings because we have a guest speaker where you're never allowed to talk. This is the first time that we are allowed to talk at a UDI meeting. And as you noticed, we're going to run out of time, and I try to be as short as possible because I think we should ask for half an hour extension because there are so many good things you might want to hear you don't hear if you go home early. I'm going to be very short on mine. I came to Kelowna in 1956 from Germany. I already applied to go to school, but at that time the young people were not accepted. The old master people had to go to master school first. So I did my journeyman study, which most of you guys don't know. In the early Middle Ages, it goes back to the Middle Ages, when you learn your trade and you finish as an apprenticeship, then you do your journeyman study. So you travel for 3 years from city to city, and you work for a different company, and after 3 years, a full-fledged journeyman. Now you might know where the name journeyman comes from, because most tradespeople had to journey for 3 years to be a full-fledged journeyman. So I did that too, and when I was finished, I wanted to go back to school, so we were too young, so they told me we have to come back later, so I decided to come for 2 years to Canada and go back. And so I came straight to Kelowna. Now people say, why would you come to Kelowna? Well, I says, I study the map and I check the weather and I check for what kind of thing and what this and that. And it says, then on the end, I had relatives. So anyhow, when I came to Kelowna here, that was just the year the Okanagan Bridge was going to start in '57. And I came here in November, late Christmas time, worked for Stritz Brothers Nursery for 65 cents an hour. And then in the spring, I wanted to work at the bridge, but I wouldn't get on. And then guess what? I worked with Sambona, with Eric and his dad and a few others, and we got into the housing industry. So make long story short, there's more questions. I could tell you all kinds of stories, but the stories I like to tell, I'd rather do out a question than just go on and tell you. If UDI wouldn't be a little bit more up to date, we could have this more often, because you know the attention you have. Okay, I could go on what we did here, but I think I'll leave room for question because I'm the last on line, so I have to make room for the others.
So Lambert's connection to mine are, we had him build our radio station CKIQ, and then 10 months later it burned to the ground. The same night he just came back from Germany on a holiday, which he could well afford after the profit he made from the first radio station he built us. Yeah, and anyway, the station had burned down and he built it a second time. But his dream was always to build a high-rise building, bigger than your 5-story buildings, Eric, and put our radio station on the roof, but that never came to pass. Well, I have a number of sort of landmark projects in Kelowna we wanted to deal with here, and a bunch of questions. We'll have to peel back the questions because of the time. But Lambert, I was going to get you to talk about the Okanagan Builders Land Corporation and Eric, because you were both involved with this, and I don't know how you could both do it at the same time, but maybe turn on these mics, and one of you can start and then just jump in. We'll just give a certain amount of time, and then we'll have to cut it off. But what the Okanagan Builders Land Development story would be was about their initiation or initiative to build spec homes in Rutland long before it was part of Kelowna. So
Let me just start. I don't like to use the mic. Never mind this yet.
you're not tall enough for the mic.
I know, but I can move it down. Kelowna was one of the first associations at the Home Builders Land House Builder Association in the British Columbia. There was nothing Vancouver, nothing Victoria. There was nothing Prince George, Kamloops. Kelowna was the first House Builder Association. It was partially initiated by Gordon Lee, who came from Calgary. He was an banks manager and was involved, So in Calgary already, there was a land development company called Karma. And there was the big builders in Calgary who got together and built things. So because of Gordon Lee come to Kelowna, we created the home builders, and then he suggested we should have a land development company like Karma. And I think we were in our home builders, we were about 40 builders, believe it or not. In Calgary, we were about 12, and we were 40 in Kelowna. We're all small builders. And we formed this the land development company. And because we developed the land development company, all us builders became friends and partners, not enemies, you know. And we developed properties. I'll let Eric fill in on some of the stuff. But because of the home builders and the Kelowna, or the Okanagan Builders Land Development Company, Kelowna just started taking off. Vernon, we tried to get a house builder association going, couldn't get going. Penticton, we go there a few times. But in Kelowna, they were all like good horse breeds, you know the young horses. We were just going strong, and because of the home builders and the Okanagan Builders Alliance, we really start taking off. Eric, you take over and you give them some more.
Oh, I don't know how much more I can tell you on that, but I think this was, late 60s or early 70s when we formed the 65, yeah, okay, you've got a better memory than me. But anyway, I might also add that that I served, I think in the early 70s for 2 years as president of the Kelowna House Builders Association, and I think Lambert followed me with another 2 years. Yeah, so anyway, we were involved, and we had a group similar to this group here, but this was just purely house builders, and we had tradesmen that became also members of the House Builders Association. But anyway, this one of the larger pieces we developed was the old Rutland Airport, and the airport was a gravel strip, and was just south of what's downtown Rutland there, you know, where the shopping center is, and south, I think, of Gray Road and the park there. And we picked that up, and I think we put it into, what, about 200 lots? 156. He remembers a lot more details than I do. But our company alone, I think, put about 50 or 60 houses in there. And then, of course, there was a lot of other builders, and we had that built out, you know, fairly quickly. The other thing that I remember about that, when we're building houses, somebody, one night, and those are the days when we didn't worry about locking doors and that. I mean, nobody stole anything or took anything that didn't belong to them. Well, anyway, one morning, we had sent out the insulation delivered, and the crew went out to install it. It was delivered the day before. They went out in the morning, and the guy phones and says, "There's no insulation there. What happened? You didn't order it." I said, "Yeah, we did." Well, anyway, we had ordered the insulation, but during that night, somebody stopped by and helped themselves and stole all our insulation. And of course, we were just outraged. Can you imagine something like this happening in Kelowna? And anyhow, we reported to the police. They found the insulation. There was a bunch of guys living up Chute Lake Road or somewhere in some makeshift thing. And anyway, they found the insulation was the right amount and everything else. And anyhow, we never ever got our insulation back in that, you know. But really what irked me is our lawyer, our corporate lawyer, which was Bob Porter at the time. And we were out the picnic there along the lakeshore in the boat, and I'm telling him about this, and he's got this grin on his face, and I said, "Bob, this is not a funny story, you know." And then I said, "Why are you grinning?" He says, "I've been, the guys can't afford a lawyer, and I've been appointed to defend them." And I said, "You're kidding me." He says, "No, that's serious." So anyway, that was a time when Kelowna started to change. You know, we had to start putting locks on and secure our buildings and that. I tell you another incident that happened about the same time too. I was building a house on the south end there, I think near Ethel Street there, not just east of the hospital, and there was a lane, and I was building one house on one side, and Matt Ulansky, who was a builder, he's retired now, and we had our tool sheds, which were just thrown together with plywood. They had a door on it, and anyway, we never locked them, because if you left tools out or whatever, they sometimes we forgot tools over the weekend. They were still there where they were. We took the tools in there. to get him out of the rain and that. And so Matt comes over there and he says, "Are all your tools in your shed?" And I said, "Yeah." And I says, "Why?" "Well," he says, "somebody broke into my tool shed and stole all our tools." And he had the lock on, and we didn't have a lock on, so I guess whoever was there probably didn't think there was anything worth stealing. And anyway, that sent another shock wave through the industry, and you know, this is when things started to change, and you know, they were still pretty good old days, but they're not anything near what we have to put up these days. So anyway, that's a little story. What else did you want? Did anything else to talk about?
That's enough. We're running
Okay,
out of time.
your turn.
I'm taking over your job.
One question we need to know, Eric. This insulation that was stolen, was it asbestos insulation? I thought that was humorous. Maybe the thieves did society a favor by stealing it. Lambert, unless you got something that will trump this, I wanted to find out, I wanted you to come up and talk about the Premier W.A.C. Bennett at the time, his challenge to the Okanagan cities, Penticton, Vernon, and Kelowna. He said, if you three cities can agree on a location, I will build you a university in Kelowna. This is in 1960.
1958.
58. That's why he's sitting here, because he knows slightly more than I do on it. Get up. It's like herding cats, isn't it?
Well, this part that bugs me from then till now, and a lot of your people don't know about it. And it was W.C. Bennett, well, actually it was Gallardi and W.C. Bennett. Gallardi was the highway minister, and Phil Gallardi, you know, he was something else, quite a guy. Anyhow, they decided we need the bridge because the highway number 1, the Rogers Pass, going to be open at AD 1, and in order that open up, we needed traffic, so we need the bridge. So Gallardi, whatever, they made the arrangement, the Okanagan got the bridge, it got opened in 1958, and Mr. W.C. Bennett, in his wisdom, very, very good man, very smart man, when they negotiated with the Indians about the need of property, go up from the bridge up the bluff, he negotiated that they're gonna option 90 acres. They're going to lease it for 99 years at $10,000 a year. And man, when I heard this, $10,000 a year, I was making about $2,000 a year. That sounded like a lot of money. But they had the foresight to build the university on the bluff up there in the 90 acres. So on the construction side, we used to have salesmen from Vernon coming in, and we argue about should the university be in Vernon where the Army camp is and the student could use it in the wintertime and the summer the cadet could use it, or should it be in Kelowna? So we argued about this, and finally Vernon came online that, okay, it can be Kelowna. Well, Kelowna happened to be in the middle, and why would you put the church outside the middle of town, right? So it made only sense to have the university right here. So finally, Vernon come online, and then Penticton backed out, and whatever, I don't know why. And you know, W.C. Bennett in his business, okay, you guys can make up your mind. Forget it, we built Simon Fraser. In 1960, they start building Henry Margraf, matter of fact, 1960, we built Simon Fraser. And could you imagine, I still get mad today, after all those years, we could have had a university right up there with a beautiful view overlooking the lake. Our kids wouldn't have to go to Vancouver. It could be right here, but we have the same problem with the pipeline right now. When politics... Just hold it. When politics overrules common sense, things go sideways. And we could tell you a lot of things about City Hall here too, but I don't know. I don't know if we're going to have enough time, because... But a few stories I hope I can plug in, and don't you guys go away till I tell the stories. But till today, I get upset that we didn't get the university, and when you think about it, 1960 it would have started. what Kelowna would be like if we had the university up there. Like till today, I get upset about this just because politicking overruled common sense.
Well, sometimes to get it right, you have to wait a long time. I think we will all agree that UBC Okanagan is a big asset. We had to wait, though, many, many years after the year you're talking about to get that. Just for your information, they have 9,000 students out there now. That's nearly the population of Peachland. Anyway, so you just have to wait. Well, we waited a long time for Prospera Place. 10 years earlier, we tried to build a multi-purpose facility. Al Horning and I were counselors, and we worked so hard to try to sell that. And 2/3 of the people said, nope, we don't want it. So 10 years later, it happened, and it happened well. Going to go to a few sort of quick questions. So make sure you know how your mic is. I don't want you standing up here, because if you sit down there, the answers will be shorter, Lambert. I meant to say shorter than even Lambert. So Lambert sort of gave us an introduction to this question when he was up here. Each of you, in sort of 1 minute or less, tell us your favorite City Hall story. This can be a good experience, a bad experience, something you heard in the parking lot, or whatever. What would be your favorite City Hall, that's Kelowna, City Hall story? Shall we start? Do you know how to turn these on? Just go testing, testing, testing. Lambert?
Testing, testing, testing. Yeah, I'm on, I guess.
Yeah, okay. RJ? You on?
I'll tell you in a minute.
Yeah, you're on. No, don't talk into that.
No, you have to press the button.
Well, here.
No, down there.
I know, I pressed that, but did I get the right one?
Okay, now yours is working.
I don't know if mine is working here. Can you hear me?
I got the right one?
Yes, yes.
No, I think he had it on. Is yours on, Eric?
No, I don't think. No, just a minute.
Testing, testing. That's it?
There, it's on. See, the microphone's right there. Just say
Okay,
testing.
testing, testing.
Not into that.
No, this testing.
1, 2,
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
It's been a tough life, Eric, learning English and then learning how to use
Well, I can
microphone.
start this because.
Okay, so tell us your favorite City Hall story. Lambert, 1 minute or less.
That's pretty quick. I got too many.
Eric said he wants to go first.
Just pick, okay, he'll go second, so you can sort it out,
Yeah,
one
yeah.
story.
Mine is going to be very short. I don't have a City Hall story, so Lambert has lots
Okay,
of them.
let me go. I'll take 2. We just got into the commercial business, and we had to build the first commercial building. I'd be short, don't worry. We had to build this building for Malloyst and Dewars on the north end. And in the early days, you didn't want to spend more money than you had, so we didn't hire our surveyors to set up for the building. The building was right on the lot line. So I set my tripod up right on the corner, and it was not the regular lot, the square, it was a round pipe. So I set my tripod at the insert, and Peerless Pipe just built this new building. They had new pins put in, so you shoot the line down the Peerless Pipe, you set it 90 degrees, you go down. The other hand, we try to find a pin, but we can't find the pin. But on the other side of Clement, there was a fence, and the two fences just met about exactly on the line where well, that must be the pine, okay? Good enough. So we put our footing in, right on the lot line, away we go. I'll be short. When the building was done, we need a surveyor certificate. Bob Reynolds was the most known guy in town. He goes out, surveys the building, and give us a surveyor certificate. I take it in, and we had only one building inspector, Mr. Kahn, and he looks at it and he says, Lambert, we got a problem. What's that? You're perfect in line with lot line, but you're 3/8 over the lot line. Well, guess what? 3/8 over the lot line, what you do? How you slice 3/8 off a block wall, right? And boy, did I feel great. Boy, did I. So anyhow, I felt really embarrassed. What do we have to do? So I go see Bob Reynolds, and I said, Bob, what can we do? I mean, I feel like an idiot. We're 3/8 over the lot line. Bob says, well, Lambert, there are a few people in Kelowna, Kelowna, they're over the lot line. Bank of Montreal is 7/8, and then this lot. And so he gave me 5 different places there over the lot line. I could tell you one famous building right now in Kelowna is 2-inch over the lot line. So I go back to City Hall and to Mr. Khan, and he says, Bill, I feel really, really bad. You know, I feel embarrassed. I run the transit, and we are 3/8, perfect straight, but 3/8 over lot line. But I said, Bill, what did the other 5 people do who are overthinking? I read them all off. The Bank of Montreal, you know. Well, before there was no way of getting out of this, right? So I said, Bill, what did the other do? Well, Lambert, what we could do, we could give you a letter that you can enjoy the 3/8 of an inch till we need it, but when we need it, then you have to give it back to us.
That's a good story. RJ, you have one?
Am I working? Can you hear?
Yep, you're working.
Well, I never had much to do with City Hall. The people that handled City Hall was Rick Miller, Peter Brenneman, and I didn't have to go down there at all and subject myself to all that humility.
I hope the counselors are listening. Okay, so we beat that question to death.
Let me give you one more, a real good one.
So this is Eric's now, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, I know, after Eric, I mean.
Go ahead. Oh, you're
Well,
right. Oh, you got one now?
One little story is back in, I think it's going back to the 80s, or maybe a little later. Well, anyway, we have built a strip mall in Vernon, their commercial mall, and then after some years there, we needed to give it a facelift. So anyway, I got the plans ready, and I was down in Vernon City Hall to get this permit. And first of all, you know, we hadn't been in Vernon for a number of years, and anyway, I was surprised the girls behind the counter still remembered me. We're excited to see me come and asked if I'm coming back to city to build again, and I said basically no, but we're doing a little job. So the inspector comes out, and I show him the plans, and was going to apply for a building permit. So he looks at the plans. He asked me, he says, "Are you making any structural changes to the building?" And I said, "No, it's basically all cosmetic." "Then why do you want a building permit?" And I look at him and says, "You mean I don't need a building permit for this?" "Not as far as I'm concerned." So anyway, to contrast, there's a couple of years ago, you know, we're in Springfield Center there, and we moved one tenant, and the tenant on the other side needed more space, and all he wanted is to have an opening cut in there, and then we patched and painted the wall. And guess what? We ended up getting a $150 fine for not taking out a building permit for painting the walls and cutting an opening in there, you know. No structural anything involved. And anyway, staff says, "Well, what do you want to do? You should go there and get upset." I said, "I'm not going to ruin my day for $150. Go pay the fine." But you know, I think it's got a little bit ridiculous. Maybe things way back were too loose, but I think the pendulum has probably swung a little bit too far in the other direction. Anyway.
Probably everyone in the room can identify with this question, but we'll ask our 3 panelists. How often have you gone by a street corner or piece of land or whatever and said, you know, back 20 years ago, I could have bought that at $500 an acre or whatever, but you didn't, right? And so we kick ourselves for things we wanted to do and then chickened out and didn't do it. Can you guys give us your story on a piece of land or a property or a business opportunity where it was a steal, but you didn't act on your impulse? I'm kind of catching you off guard there. Maybe it doesn't come
No,
right
you
away.
don't.
No?
Go ahead.
Okay, Lambert.
We bought the first, we were the third tenant, the third people who bought a piece of land on Kirshner Road where our first office was, out of the 90 acres where it's breeding orchard. We built our shop there, our first building, and then we bought the next lot, and we bought the other lot, and we bought the other lot, and the other lot. And for the 46 years, we worked on that site and built it up. And we paid tons of taxes over the years. I hate to say how much, because every year you need a bigger rucksack when I go and pay the taxes, right? So now, city staff in his wisdom, and the problem is we got some guys working in City Hall. They usually go up to Everest, and when they go up to Camp 6 or 7, they forgot their oxygen tank, and then they don't think as clear as the rest of us do, right? So now they want to put a 4-lane highway right middle through my buildings from Kirshner Road to other road. I think I made a good deal when I bought the land, but looks like right now I'm going to lose it. How is that?
Gee, I'm sort of sorry I asked the question. Do I see anybody else with equal enthusiasm about
No,
some
the
missed
only-
opportunity?
The only thing is, Eric just assured me that it wasn't a financial combustion on your fire.
Financial combustion on their farm.
Well, that was the old story if you had a fire.
Oh, I see, okay.
A little story, Walter, I like to tell, because I know we're running out of time, but I think it's important because when you deal with City Hall, and we were told, when we talked about this, we can be political a little bit incorrect. It's okay, you know. So, what I try to say is sometimes when the foot is on the other shoe, on the other foot, then sometimes there's a change. So anyway, make long story short, when we started development on Kirshner Road, Spall Road, there was no sewer, there was no water. Matter of fact, it was outside city boundaries when we first started out there. It was the regional district, okay? So then it became city, and now we get sewer. So we had well water, we had septic tanks. And septic tanks you have to put on the lot line, you know, just so it's out of the way, whatever. Make long story short, we get sewer, and we have the 4 lots, which all our property, but the 4 lots. So now I set my transit up, and we're gonna dig a ditch, and we go from the back of the building on Spall Road all the way to Kirshner Road. It's downhill, and shit usually flows better downhill than uphill, right? So we set the transit up to build it, make the ditch, and guess what? When you want an inspector, they don't show up. When you don't want them, we're just digging up, and here Jerry Mueller shows up, and he says, "Library, what you doing?" I said, "What?" We're digging the ditch in for the sewer. Goes down to the line. Why you can't do that? Why can't I do it? Well, he says, "There's a lot line." I said, "Well, I want this lot, on this lot, what's the difference?" "No, you can't cross a lot line." Holy shucks, what you do now? That means I would have to come down the lot, go between the building, all the way back to Spall Road, and you know, it was almost impossible. So I think it's smart I go downtown City Hall. There was still City Hall at the old library building. And Di Pasquale was engineer in engineering, and he came from Trail. He moved into a hole, and he stayed there. So I want to talk to Di Pasquale, and they would not even let me talk to him. They want to know what's all about. Well, I says, you know, about the sewer, this and that. So anyhow, make long story short, I can't cross the lot line. Can't do it. What I do now? You know, I feel kind of bad because I would have to rip everything open. So a day later, the city's crew is out on Spall Road and fiddle around on the manhole for the sewer line. Oh, so, and I know all those guys, all working guys. "Hey, how are you guys doing? Nice day, isn't it?" Yeah, bullshit. "Hey, how about we go for coffee?" "Yeah, sure. Down Kirshner Road, the old third building, we'll go for coffee." I said, "By the way, what are you guys doing?" "Oh, well, we're just checking the intake for the sewer." I says, "Yeah, I know, it's too high, we can't make it." "Yeah, we can't make it." I says, "I knew that, I didn't know, but I had an idea." So I rushed down City Hall. "Hey, Di Pasquale, forget about easement, everything, we just go back to Spall Road. Hold it. Now the shoe was on the other foot, you couldn't do it. Now all of a sudden it was okay to go the other way, but before I couldn't do it.
Okay, we are rapidly running out of time. We're going to have one final question. I want you to think about this for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to talk about the airport we now have, Canada's 10th busiest and largest, and give you a bit of a history on that one. It's quite interesting. The final question to sum up will be, what is the best piece of advice that you could give people in the industry today? So just think about that. What sort of words of wisdom could you give to the new hot shots that are coming up and are going to be sitting as legends 50 years from now? So about the airport, there's many in the room will know this, but maybe not all of you do. But during my elected years, I always saw the airport as this city's single biggest asset. Very few cities in Canada own their own airport. Kelowna does. And it's not at the taxpayers' expense, never has been, and I pray never will be. But anyway, in 1945 or 46, the mayor was Dick Parkinson, and I believe Ernie Winter was on council at that time. The two of them wanted to have a meeting with the Vernon City Council to talk about the city of Vernon and the city of Kelowna building an airport jointly between the two cities and getting federal money, et cetera, and eventually getting scheduled airline service. This is because of what was happening in Rutland, where the old airstrip wasn't going to be long-term, and it was now a housing development. So what was Kelowna going to do going forward? Anyway, Parkinson and Winter came back from Vernon with their tails between their legs. The Vernon City Council had no vision, didn't agree on the site, even though the site was the only site between Kelowna and Vernon you could put an airport. So Dick Parkinson phoned a friend of his, Grant McConaughey, who had just started an airline called Canadian Pacific Airlines. And he said, Grant, he said, we want to build this airport. We're going to go to our taxpayers. I believe in those days, the only people that had a vote in civic government was landowners. I believe that was the case. It doesn't much matter. Whoever voted, voted. So Grant McConaughey said, well, what do you mean? You don't have an airport? He said, no, we want to build one. And if we build one, we'll have a better chance of getting federal funding and community support if you will assure us that you will bring in scheduled airline service, probably DC-3s or whatever, on a regular scheduled basis. And McConaughey said, geez, Kelowna's pretty darn small. I mean, at that time, I think it was only 7,000 people. But anyway, he said, I will do this for you, Dick. I will guarantee that we'll give you scheduled airline service. That might be once a week, but it'll be scheduled. Every Thursday or every whatever, there'll be an airplane. So Kelowna then had to go to the voters to get approval to buy this land on its own, because Vernon didn't want in, and because the land was outside the city limits. The Capri Hotel, by the way, at that time was also outside the city limits. This is the interesting thing, and with the election coming up, maybe you should keep this in mind, and other elections too. The vote was in favor of buying that land to do the airport, 466 votes to 460. So the decision to build that airport was because 6 more people voted yes. So there's a lesson to be learned there. So the airport was built, and away it went, and McConaughey delivered on his promise, and that was the start for air service into Kelowna. And I think everyone in this room would agree that because of that airport and the kind of service generated today, that goes a long, long way to the success of this great city we all live in. So it was 10 months before I became mayor in 1996. The former mayor, Jim Stewart, who I had a tremendous regard for, had worked for a long, long time and was successful in bringing in WestJet. WestJet was starting up this brand new airline. It went to 4 places, Edmonton, Calgary, Kelowna, and Vancouver. And they started service on February 29th, 1996. That's not that long ago. And then 10 months later, I became the mayor, and within 18 months after that, we then managed to get Alaska Airlines, Horizon Airlines to come into Kelowna, which would be Kelowna to Seattle. 2 or 3 times a day, by the way, 7 days a week. So that made us an international airport. But Ottawa wouldn't recognize it because they'd have to give Kelowna Airport more funding if they admitted it was an international airport. I said to the manager of the airport at the time, Roger Selleck, I said, Roger, I said, do we own all the land up to the highway? And he said, yeah, we do. I said, well, why don't we at city expense go and build a sign there saying Kelowna International Airport? We are. We go to Seattle. Of course, Roger liked stuff like that. So he did it. And then we made sure photographs of this sign and the airport and planes coming in and out appeared in Ottawa. And pretty soon Ottawa started to believe it was indeed an international airport, and it eventually got listed as an international airport worldwide. And today you have a city-owned airport, it's an international airport, and it's the 10th busiest in Canada. And that all happened because 6 positive people showed up at the polls that day, so the vote wasn't defeated to put the airport there. I thought it would be a story of interest to you.
Very
So
good.
let's. So back to the question then, just to sum up and very briefly, what would be sort of in a word, what would be the best piece of advice you could give the people in this room that are fairly new to the business of development? Eric, do you want to go first? Do you want to stand up here and say goodbye and all?
Well, to put it in a nutshell is you start a business, build it on a solid foundation. You have to borrow money when you start out, and which I had to do, and pretty well most of the others. But have a goal of when you're going to pay this off, or have a goal to be debt-free at some point, and make that a goal rather than just keep expanding and borrowing more money in that. I was on that track here up until about the 1980s, when that crunch came. And 75% probably of my competition went down, never to come up. We were on the edge of going down ourselves. And I learned that this, if I can help it, this is not going to happen to me again. And we made our focus to, at some point, to be debt-free, and do less, but have it well financed, and don't expose yourself with huge debt. I like what Frank Stronach says in his book, and it's R.J. that gave me the book that I read, and you know who he is. It's Magna Man that built the Magna Corporation. That's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It has sales of $30 billion, and they have no debt, and they carry $1 billion in cash at any given point. And I like what he says. He says, I've never seen a company go bankrupt that had money in the bank and no debt. You can weather any storm if you're in that position, but you'll go down in the storm if you're over-leveraged and carry too much debt. So keep that in mind when you're expanding. And
Good. Thank you, Eric.
yeah.
Frank Stronach has more money than RJ, but you probably have better advice.
No, Frank Stronach I know quite well. And he has my admiration that if you read his book, how worthy he was. His partners tried to do this to him. He sold stuff off and got control of his company again. He's an amazing man. That is. Eric told me when he read the book, he said, I thought I'd done well as an immigrant.
But he's done a lot better.
So, but anyhow, coming into Kelowna, I remember the advice I got from a bank manager years ago, and a friend of mine and I started a company. And we were laying everything out, and of course it's all sweat labor, and we're renting everything. And he said, one thing to remember, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And old Jack Galbraith, who was in Kelowna, one of the earlier aldermen, and his son Alistair grew up here too. He and I are the same age. But he said, you want to be like the old Scotchman. You never put your hand out any further than you can quickly bring it back. And you've seen so many brilliant people taken down with debt. Look at what happened to the Capozzi family. They lost it all in the high interest rate, 20% interest. Took it all away. So watch your debt. Isn't that right, Mary Jean?
Okay, Lambert.
Go ahead.
Thank you, RJ.
I had, over the years, quite a few times young people come to my office, especially when we were still down on Kirchner Road, and said, Lambert, seems like you're quite successful. What you recommend, this and this and this? And I says, item number one, do what you like to do. And if you do what you like to do, you get good at it and you enjoy it. If you do something just to make money, life is a pain. You just go to work and you hate it. Do what you like to do, and if you do like you do and you get good at it, you get this. So I got a few quotes I'd just like to read off because that's what's said on. Quitters never win. Winners never quit. He has a right to criticize who has a heart to help. When you start coasting, there's only one way, it's downhill. Tension is like driving with your brakes on. You must have long-range goals to keep you from being frustrated by short-range failures. You can hit a home run if you can't hit a home run if you risk a strikeout. So with other words, just give her, go for it.
Good. Go for the fence. Well, thank you, Lambert. I think that puts a nice cap on the afternoon. We didn't go to the crowd for questions you might have, but our panelists promised me day before yesterday that they would hang around for anybody that wanted to talk to them one-on-one. And thank you for being so gracious this afternoon. And thank you from the chair.
Thank you very much. Can I please ask Ben Ralston to come up for a moment, please?
I'm going to keep this very short, but on behalf of everybody in attendance, on behalf of UDI, we are more than honored and very privileged to have you all speak to us today. And we're thankful for your stories, and also thankful for everything you've left as a legacy for this city. So, on behalf of everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. And I would also like to ask Brian Lebec to come up for a door prize.
And the winner is Donald McLean.
Congratulations, Donald. All right. I know those of you who do need to leave, I'm going to open the floor right now for a question or two. Does anybody want to throw one our way? Anybody? Come on, I know you got questions. How about Colin? You got a question? No questions? Okay, maybe there will be some questions from people outside. I'm going to ask a question. Biggest mistake you made in business? That's a big question.
3/8 over the lot line.
Love it. RJ?
When we were building out at Orchard Park on Orchard Place right next door, we hired the same contractor that the Safeway had hired to finish it off so we wouldn't have any mix-up. They'd be able to work together, and we worked out at the same price per square foot to build it. They saw the stake there and used that stake as a line, and it was the stake for Marathon. Our stake was 10 feet back in.
Okay.
They had to tear their whole wall down and move it back 10 feet at their cost.
Remember that?
Oh, yeah. And same idea, yeah. Measure twice, cut once.
3/8
yeah.
and 10 feet are slightly different. Eric?
You know, to be honest with you, I've made so many mistakes in my life that I would have a hard time to decide which was the biggest. But making mistakes is part of life, and you can learn from your mistakes. You have to learn from your mistakes. I think the worst thing I see if you make a mistake and keep making it over and over again. And I also came to the realization that I not only have to learn from my own mistakes, I also have to learn from other people's mistakes, because nobody lives long enough to make all the mistakes yourself.
Exactly. Walter, how about you?
Oh, I didn't know I was going to be asked.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay, can you hear it?
Yeah.
I think, I don't want to say it was the biggest mistake, but because of what I did, I would now say this. If you're going to start a company, and if you require partners, I'm assuming like a private company, not a public company, always get partners that are going to put money into it. Make sure the partners aren't expecting to get a return on their money in the short term. Make sure they're also like-minded or have some sort of empathy for the kind of project you want to build or go into or company you want to operate. Because you don't want shareholders who are expecting a return when there's no return there. Yeah.
Okay,
Let me just add this one, okay, about the mistakes.
okay.
Nothing would be done at all if one wanted, if one waited until one would do it so well that no one could find any fault.
So don't be a
Nothing would get done.
perfectionist. Okay, go ahead,
I
RJ.
have one more, and this was when we were putting things together, and I'm mentioning my friend Lloyd Callahan. And you'd sit around and he'd say, now who's going to do the work? Because they got plenty of these around.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's solid advice anytime you're putting a group together.
One last question. Walter, we'll start with you. Biggest goal for the year ahead?
This year?
Yeah?
Get up tomorrow morning.
Well, the more short-range goal is in view of the fact that my tickets for Broadway for Hamilton showed up by courier yesterday, and my email confirmation for tickets for Come From Away for Broadway again showed up. My biggest short-term goal will to make sure I don't miss the plane to New York.
Okay, good. Eric?
I don't really have my age. I just turned 80, and I appreciate every day that I can get up in the morning and I'm still moving around and I'm healthy, so taking one day at a time.
Hey, good one.
RJ?
Well, he's 8 years younger than I am. So I get up and I look at all those horses that I'm feeding. And my daughter, Roseanne, she is trying to move them into people where they can have another use. Because I'm looking at raising foals right now. And by the time they're racing, I'm well into my 90s. And maybe I'm not going to be here. So I guess what I'm saying to people, you should come and buy a horse and then buy land to keep it on. And now you'll have, and they always, the one line they had in the horse, they said, any man that owned a good promising two-year-old racehorse never committed suicide.
That's very good. Lambert?
Well, day by day, we're still alive, still do what we can do and go from there.
Yeah.
Awesome. On behalf of the UDI and I think many people in the room, I'm sure that we could spend a great deal more time than we have, but I certainly, from my personal perspective, really enjoyed getting to know you all a little bit better. It's an honor to have you here, and we truly thank you for your time today. Thank you very much.
Up on it.